You're a complete disaster. An embarrassment. The voice of Victoria, the manager, sliced through the silence of the Gilded Spoon, one of New York's chicest restaurants. She grabbed the young waitress, Ellie, by the arm, her fingers digging in angrily. The dining room, filled with wealthy and important patrons, fell silent. All eyes were on them. You're fired. Get your things and get out of my restaurant. I will not have this incompetence tarnishing the reputation of the Gilded Spoon on our most important night. The humiliation was absolute. Ellie, in her simple uniform and worn-out shoes, felt her face burn, but her gaze remained steady. She pulled her arm from Victoria's grip and, without a word, turned her back, not toward the staff room, but straight for the main entrance. She walked past the curious stairs, past the expensive floral arrangements, and out into the cold New York night. Before we get started, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. Now, let's get back to it. Enjoy the story. What no one knew was that the woman who had just been fired wasn't just Ellie, the waitress. She was Eleanor Vance, the CEO of the Vance Hospitality Group. And this firing wasn't an end, but the beginning of a reckoning. Eleanor's story had begun 6 months earlier, when her father, Richard Vance, the founder of their entire empire, had passed away. Eleanor inherited the title, sitting in an office on the 80th floor of Vance Tower, amidst the luxury and the loneliness. She wore expensive suits like armor, her face a mask of authority. On the outside, she was a successful CEO, closing billion-dollar deals. But on the inside, she felt like a ghost, lost in the giant shadow of her father. Richard Vance hadn't been born into wealth. He started as a dishwasher. He always said the soul of the company wasn't in the boardrooms, but in the kitchens, the laundry rooms, the hallways, in the employees whose names no one bothered to learn. Because of this, he would spend 1 week a year working undercover in his own establishments as a housekeeper, a line cook, or a janitor. He called it his reality check. A wild idea began to form in Eleanor's mind. What if she did the same? The board would think she was insane, but the idea grew. She was negotiating a massive deal with Julian Albright, a tech billionaire, to modernize the company. This deal was the future of Vance Hospitality. But Eleanor felt she was selling something she didn't understand from the ground up. She wanted to feel the soul of the company, the way her father had. She wanted to know if his values still lived there, or if they were just pretty words on paper. The chosen target was the Gilded Spoon, the company's flagship restaurant, a temple of high cuisine. The report said it was a model of efficiency and employee satisfaction. Eleanor had her doubts. Perfection, she knew, often hid something ugly. Her first call was to Brenda Miller, the head of HR and one of the few people she implicitly trusted. Brenda had been her father's confidant. "You want to do what?" Brenda asked, stunned. "I want a job, a waitress at the Gilded Spoon. No one can know who I am. I need a new identity, a backstory, and a spot on the team that won't raise suspicion," Eleanor replied. After a long silence, Brenda said, "Richard would have loved this. He always said you had more of him in you than you knew." "All right, Eleanor, let's get you a job. Welcome to minimum wage." The transformation was jarring. Eleanor Vance, the CEO, vanished. In her place was Ellie, a woman in her late 20s with a simple backstory of someone who moved from town to town, picking up odd jobs. Brenda created a convincing resume. Eleanor supplied the wardrobe, faded black slacks, non-slip shoes with treads worn nearly smooth, and a few old gray t-shirts. She took her hair down and removed her expensive manicure. Looking in the mirror, she saw a stranger, tired, anxious, and lacking the confidence that was her constant companion. This was good. It was exactly what she needed. Ellie was believable. Her first day at the Gilded Spoon was a shock to the system. She entered through the back employee entrance, a world away from the lavish lobby she knew from press events. The air was thick with the smells of bleach, hot oil, and stress. The elegance of the dining room was propped up by the frenetic labor of the kitchen and staff. She was introduced to the manager, Victoria Hayes, an immaculate woman with a flawless uniform and an unflappable bun. Victoria had eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never reached her eyes. She looked Ellie up and down, her gaze lingering on the worn-out shoes. The faintest sneer touched her lips. "You're the new girl, Ellie," Victoria said, her voice cold. "Brenda in HR fast-tracked your hiring. You must have a guardian angel. Don't expect one here." She handed Ellie a thin apron. "Your station is the back corridor. Water, bread, and clearing. Don't speak to the patrons unless they speak to you. Stay out of the way. And for God's sake, try not to look like you sleep at a bus station." The jab stung. Eleanor, the CEO, would have fired her on the spot. But Ellie, the waitress, just nodded meekly. The first few hours were a blur of organized chaos. Ellie's work was grueling and endless, hauling heavy trays of dirty dishes to the clattering dish pit, polishing endless racks of wine glasses until her fingers ached, refilling water glasses with a pitcher that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Her muscles, accustomed to Pilates classes, screamed in protest. It was during a brief lull that she met Sam Jackson. He was an older waiter, maybe in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed out of place in the restaurant's frantic energy. He was polishing silverware, his movements efficient. He saw her stretching, her face tight with pain. "First day?" he asked, his voice warm. "Is it that obvious?" Ellie managed with a weak smile. "Everyone looks like that on their first day." He chuckled. "I'm Sam. If you need anything, just ask. Victoria can be a little sharp." "A little," Ellie agreed, rubbing her sore shoulder. "She's all about appearances," Sam said, his voice low. "This place is her kingdom. Just keep your head down, do your work, and you'll be fine." He paused, looking at her more closely. "You have kind eyes. Remind me of the old man." "The old man?" Ellie asked, her heart giving a lurch. "Mr. Vance? The founder?" "Yeah," Sam said with a fond smile. "He used to come in here years ago, not as the big boss, you know. He'd just sit at the bar, or sometimes even help in the kitchen if they got slammed. Said he liked to see how the engine was running. He had the same look in his eye as you, like he was really seeing you, not just looking at you." Tears pricked Ellie's eyes. She turned away quickly, pretending to check a stack of napkins. The ghost of her father was here, in the memories of a kind waiter who had no idea who he was talking to. The discomfort, the aching muscles, the manager's contempt, it all fell away for a moment, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. She wasn't just a ghost in her father's office anymore. She was on the ground floor, searching for his soul, and she felt she was exactly where she needed to be. The first week bled into the second, and Ellie's life settled into a weary rhythm, punctuated by the chime of service bells and the ache in her feet. The glamour of the gilded spoon had become a thin veneer over a world of constant pressure. She learned the staff's nonverbal language, a nod to signal a table needed clearing, a quick glance to warn of an approaching manager, a shared, tired sigh in the momentary quiet of the locker room. Eleanor, the CEO, was a distant memory. Ellie, the waitress, was her reality. Victoria remained her chief tormentor. The manager seemed to have made Ellie her personal project in humiliation. The taunts were rarely overt enough to report, but they were constant, a slow drip of poison. "Ellie, your apron is soiled. Again," Victoria would say in front of other staff, her voice laced with disappointment. "The standards at the Gilded Spoon are absolute. Perhaps they're a bit too high for you." She consistently assigned Ellie to Siberia, the least desirable section of the restaurant with few tables, ensuring her tips were dismally low. When a wealthy, well-known patron complained his water had been refilled too slowly, Victoria pulled Ellie aside. "Do you know who that was?" she hissed, her face inches from Ellie's. "That was Mr. Peterson from Peterson Holdings. His opinion matters. Your sloppiness reflects on me, on all of us. Get it together, or you'll be cleaning out grease traps." Every insult, every unjust criticism, Eleanor filed away. This was no longer about her own bruised feelings. It was about the company's culture. If this was happening to her, it was happening to others. She saw the fear in the younger staff's eyes, the way they flinched when Victoria approached. This wasn't the healthy, respectful work environment her father had envisioned. This was a kingdom ruled by fear. Sam Jackson remained her one ally. He'd discreetly slip her a protein bar when she missed her meal break and offer quiet words of encouragement. "Don't let her get to you," he'd murmur as they passed in the service corridor. "Your work is good, you're clean, you're fast. She just needs a target." During a late-night closing shift, as they rolled silverware into napkins, Sam opened up. "You know, Mr. Vance would have hated what this place has become," he said, not looking at her. "He used to say that a happy staff means happy customers. He cared. He knew my wife's name, that my son was applying to college. He sent a gift when my first grandchild was born." Sam shook his head slowly. "Now it's all about numbers, about appearances. The heart is gone." Eleanor's own heart ached to hear it. "What changed?" she asked, her voice soft. "He died," Sam said simply. "And the daughter took over, the new CEO. We never see her, of course. She's probably just like the rest of them, lives in an ivory tower, looking at spreadsheets. Has no idea what it's like down here. The soul of this place died with him." The words were a punch to the gut. Ivory tower, spreadsheets, no idea. It was everything she feared she was becoming. It was the very reason she was here. "Maybe she just doesn't know," Ellie offered, her voice almost a whisper. Sam gave a sad, cynical smile. They never know. A few nights later, Ellie stumbled upon the second crack in the Gilded Spoon's perfect facade. The restaurant had a tip pooling system. All tips were collected, and a percentage was distributed to the bussers, bartenders, and hosts, with the rest split among the waiters based on their hours. It was meant to be a fair system, but Ellie, ever the CEO at heart, had a head for numbers. The amount she received, even on the rare busy nights she was allowed a good section, always seemed mathematically off. It was always a few dollars short of what she calculated it should be. Not a lot, but enough to notice. One night she stayed late, pretending she'd forgotten something in her locker. She watched from the shadows of the hallway as Victoria tallied the night's earnings in her small glass-walled office. She saw Victoria carefully separate the credit card slips from the cash. She watched as the manager entered the credit card tips into the payroll system, then counted the cash, and then she saw it. Victoria took a small stack of bills from the cash pile and slipped it into her purse before bundling the rest for deposit. It was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost invisible. $100 here, maybe $200 there, skimmed off the cash tips before they were ever officially recorded. Over a week, a month, a year, it would add up to thousands of dollars stolen directly from the pockets of her staff. From Sam, who was trying to help his son with college. From Maria, the hostess who worked 2 jobs to support her mother. From every single person who toiled under Victoria's rule. The rage that filled Eleanor was cold and sharp. This wasn't just bullying or mismanagement. This was theft. This was a betrayal of the trust her father had placed in his people. She discreetly took out her phone, hiding behind a large potted plant, and filmed for 30 seconds, just long enough to capture Victoria pocketing the money. The video was grainy, but it was undeniable proof. The next day, the restaurant buzzed with an electric tension. An email had gone out. Julian Albright, the tech billionaire, was coming to the Gilded Spoon for a business dinner to finalize the last stages of the Vance Hospitality partnership. His visit was the final, informal seal of approval. The entire future of the company, Eleanor's flagship initiative, hinged on this dinner. Victoria gathered the staff for a pre-shift meeting. Her eyes gleamed with a feverish intensity. "Tonight is the most important night in this restaurant's history," she announced, her voice ringing with self-importance. "Julian Albright is not just any guest. He is a kingmaker. His experience tonight will be reported directly to corporate. Everything must be beyond perfect. The silverware must gleam. The glasses must be invisible. Every plate must be a work of art. Every smile must be genuine." She scanned the assembled staff, her eyes landing, as always, on Ellie. "You," she said, pointing a sharp finger. "You will be in the kitchen tonight polishing glasses. You are not to enter the dining room. I will not have him see this." She gestured vaguely at Ellie's simple, clean but worn uniform. "Your particular brand of shabby chic is not the image we are presenting tonight. Am I clear?" A murmur went through the staff. It was a public and brutal demotion. Ellie felt the flush of humiliation creep up her neck, but inside, a cold resolve settled in. This was perfect. Victoria, in her arrogance, was making a fatal mistake, and Julian Albright, the man whose judgment she supposedly valued so highly, was about to be part of the final test. She had planned to observe him, and now she would see how he and his team behaved when they thought no one important was watching. "Understood, Victoria," Ellie said, her voice steady. She retreated to the humid confines of the kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of stolen tips, her father's legacy, and the impending arrival of the man who held her company's future in his hands. The stage was set for either a disaster or a reckoning. The atmosphere in the Gilded Spoon's kitchen was a pressure cooker about to explode. Chefs shouted orders in a rapid-fire cadence of French and Spanish. Pans sizzled, and the air was a humid tapestry of dozens of competing, delicious aromas. Confined to a small, stuffy corner by the dish pit, Ellie polished wineglass after wineglass, her movements automatic. Each gleaming glass was a testament to her invisibility. Victoria wanted her hidden, and hidden she was. From her vantage point, she could peer through the swinging doors into the serene, golden-lit world of the dining room. She watched Julian Albright and his entourage of 3 arrive. He was exactly as he appeared in business journals, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Ellie's car, with dark, restless eyes and an air of impatient brilliance. He didn't walk. He strode as if the world was struggling to keep up with him. Victoria greeted them with a dazzling, obsequious smile, personally escorting them to the best table in the house, a secluded corner booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. For an hour, the dinner service proceeded with military precision. Ellie continued her mind-numbing task, her thoughts racing. She had the proof of Victoria's theft on her phone. She had Sam's heartbreaking testimony about the company's lost soul. and now she was about to see the character of the man she was betting the company's future on. Then, disaster struck, or, as it turned out, opportunity. A young busboy, barely out of his teens and trembling with nerves, was carrying a tray with a bottle of an expensive reserve red wine to Albright's table. As he approached, another waiter, hurrying from the kitchen, bumped into him. The collision was minor, but the result was catastrophic. The young busboy stumbled, and the decanter of dark red wine flew from his hands, arcing through the air and splashing directly onto the crisp white shirt of one of Albright's associates. A collective gasp swept the dining room. The associate leaped up, swearing. The young busboy froze, his face ashen with terror. Victoria descended on the scene like a hawk. Her face was a mask of fury. "You incompetent fool!" she hissed at the boy, her voice low and vicious, meant only for the staff. "Get to the back now!" She turned to the table, her expression instantly morphing into one of deep, apologetic concern. "Mr. Albright, gentlemen, I am so sorry. This is unforgivable. We will of course take care of the dry cleaning and comp the entire meal." "Forget the meal," the stained man grumbled, dabbing at his chest with a napkin. "This shirt is ruined." "We need more wine," Julian Albright said, his voice sharp and dismissive. He didn't even glance at the panicked busboy being hustled away. He just looked annoyed, as if a fly had buzzed too close to his head. Victoria's eyes darted around frantically. Her top waiters were busy. The junior staff was terrified. Her gaze swept past the kitchen doors and landed on Ellie. It was a look of pure desperation mixed with disgust. There was no one else. "You!" she mouthed silently, beckoning with a furious jerk of her head. "Get out here now. Just serve the wine. Don't speak." Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. She wiped her sweaty palms on her apron, set down her polishing cloth, and pushed through the swinging doors. The sudden quiet of the dining room was jarring. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her as she approached the most important table in the restaurant. Sam, from across the room, gave her a small, encouraging nod. She approached the table, her movement steady and composed. She picked up a fresh napkin from a service cart and began to discreetly blot the small puddle of wine on the floor. "Just leave it," Julian Albright said impatiently, not even looking at her. He was scrolling through something on his phone. "Just bring the wine." One of his associates, a younger man with a cruel smirk, leaned toward his stained colleague. "Get a load of this one," he muttered, just loud enough for Ellie to hear clearly. "They must be desperate. Did she get that uniform from a charity bin?" The other man snickered. "Probably not making much if she has to wear shoes that sad." Ellie froze for a fraction of a second. The insult was so casual, so unthinking. It wasn't even aimed at her, but at the idea of her, at the poor, invisible person they assumed her to be. She looked up, and her eyes met Julian Albright's for a brief moment. There was no reproof in his gaze, no sign that he disapproved of his associate's comment. There was just indifferent dismissal. He heard them, and he didn't care. In that moment, Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. This was the man she was about to entrust with her father's legacy, a man who sat by silently while his team mocked a person they believed to be beneath them. Victoria returned with a fresh bottle of wine, her face tight with stress. "Ellie will serve you," she said to the table, then turned to Ellie. "Be careful," she whispered venomously. "Don't screw this up." Ellie took the bottle. Her hands were steady. Her CEO training, her years of maintaining composure in high-stakes negotiations, kicked in. She presented the bottle to Albright, her voice low and professional. "Cabernet Sauvignon, 2005. Albright grunted his approval without looking up from his phone. As she poured the wine with a steady, practiced hand, Victoria hovered nearby, watching her every move like a predator. She was so focused on Ellie's performance that she didn't notice Albright's associate subtly stick his foot out into the narrow space between the tables. As Ellie stepped back from the table, her foot caught on his outstretched shoe. She stumbled, not hard, but enough to make her lose her balance for a second. A tiny amount of wine, no more than a few drops, sloshed from the bottle onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was nothing, a minor spill, but to Victoria, it was the final straw. "That's it!" she shrieked, her carefully controlled facade shattering completely. The entire dining room went silent. Patrons turned to stare. "You're a complete disaster, an embarrassment." She grabbed Ellie by the arm, her fingernails digging in like talons. "You're fired. Get out. Get your things and get out of my restaurant. I will not have this incompetence tarnishing the reputation of the Gilded Spoon on our most important night." The public humiliation was absolute. Patrons stared, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity. Julian Albright and his team watched as if it were a show, a minor diversion. The associate who had tripped her looked smug. Sam started to move forward, a protest on his lips, but Victoria shot him a look that could kill. Eleanor looked at Victoria's hate-filled face. She looked at the smirking faces at Albright's table, and she looked at the shock and fear on the faces of the other staff. She didn't fight. She didn't argue. She simply pulled her arm from Victoria's grip, her expression unreadable. "All right," she said, her voice quiet but clear. She turned and walked away, not toward the employee locker room, but straight for the main entrance. She walked past the gawking patrons, past the grand floral arrangements, and out through the heavy glass doors into the cold New York night. She didn't look back. Victoria, breathing heavily, turned back to Albright's table, forcing a smile. "My deepest apologies. She's gone. Now, may I offer you a complimentary dessert from our pastry chef?" She was triumphant. She had excised the stain, protected her perfect kingdom. She had no idea she had just fired her own executioner. Outside on the sidewalk, Eleanor Vance took a deep breath. The persona of Ellie fell away like a snakeskin. The CEO was back, and she had everything she needed. She pulled out her phone, not to hail a cab, but to call Marcus Thorne, her COO. "Marcus," she said, her voice ice-cold, "clear my morning schedule and book the main dining room at the Gilded Spoon for an emergency corporate mandate meeting at 10 a.m. I want the entire restaurant staff there, on the clock. And Marcus, make sure Julian Albright and his executive team are personally invited. Tell them it's the final signing for our partnership." There was a pause on the line. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" "Everything," she replied. A dangerous calm had settled over her. "Is about to be." The next morning, an unusual energy filled the Gilded Spoon. The restaurant was closed to the public. A sign on the door read, "Closed for a private corporate event." Inside, the entire staff, waiters, hosts, cooks, dishwashers, was gathered in the main dining room in confused huddles. They had been summoned to a mandatory 10 a.m. meeting, an unheard-of event. Victoria Hayes moved through the room with an air of supreme self-importance. She had gotten the corporate email late last night and had interpreted it as a direct result of her decisive actions. Clearly, headquarters had heard about the Albright dinner, and this meeting was to commend her for her swift, professional handling of the incident. She wore her most immaculate uniform, her makeup was flawless, and she was already composing the speech she'd give when they inevitably offered her a promotion. She saw Sam Jackson standing by the window, a worried frown on his face. "Cheer up, Sam," she said with a smug smile. "This is a good thing. It shows that corporate is finally paying attention to standards. To my standards." Sam just shook his head, his eyes scanning the room. He was looking for Ellie. He felt a deep sense of guilt for not defending her more forcefully last night. He hoped she was okay. At 10 a.m. sharp, the front doors opened. In walked Marcus Thorne, the COO, his face grim. He was followed by several other stone-faced executives from the Vance Hospitality Group. The staff fell silent, cowed by the sudden influx of corporate power. A moment later, Julian Albright and his two associates from the night before arrived. Albright looked impatient, tapping at his phone. He had been told this was a formality, a final signing ceremony before a press release. He nodded briefly at Victoria, who beamed at him as if they were co-conspirators. "All right, Marcus. Let's get this over with," Albright said brusquely. "Where are the papers? And where's your CEO? I was told I'd finally meet the elusive Eleanor Vance." As if on cue, the doors opened one last time. The woman who walked in was not Ellie. This woman commanded the room the second she entered. She wore a chic, impeccably tailored navy blue power suit. Her blonde hair was swept back into a professional chignon, and she walked with a quiet, unshakable confidence that radiated authority. Her eyes, cool and intelligent, swept over the room, taking in every detail. The staff stared, confused. Julian Albright looked intrigued. Victoria Hayes stared, and the blood drained from her face. Her smug smile faltered, then collapsed entirely. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. It was the woman she had fired. It was the waitress with the worn shoes and the stained apron. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. The eyes were the same, but the power behind them was terrifying. The woman walked to the front of the room, stopping before the assembled crowd. Marcus Thorne moved to her side. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm, clear, and amplified by the room's acoustics. It was the same voice that had said, "All right," before walking out the door last night. But now, it carried the weight of an entire corporation. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eleanor Vance. I am the CEO of the Vance Hospitality Group." A collective gasp rippled through the staff as jaws dropped. Sam Jackson's eyes went wide in stunned disbelief, a slow smile of understanding spreading across his face. He looked from Eleanor to Victoria, whose face had gone from pale to a ghastly shade of gray. She looked like she was going to faint. Julian Albright and his team stopped what they were doing, their expressions shifting from boredom to utter shock. The associate who had tripped her looked physically ill. Eleanor's gaze settled on her staff. My father, Richard Vance, founded this company on one simple principle, that our strength is our people. He believed that to understand a business, you have to understand it from the ground up. For the past few weeks, I have had the honor of working alongside you here at the Gilded Spoon. She gestured vaguely at herself. Though you knew me as Ellie. Another wave of murmurs. As Ellie, Eleanor continued, her voice hardening slightly. I learned many things. I learned that many of you work tirelessly with dignity and grace under immense pressure. I saw the dedication in the kitchen, the professionalism of waiters like Sam Jackson, and the resilience of our entire support staff. You are the heart of this company, and I am deeply proud of you. She paused, letting the words sink in. Then her gaze shifted and locked directly onto Victoria Hayes. But I also learned that the heart of this restaurant is sick. It has been poisoned by a culture of fear, humiliation, and disrespect. A culture that judges people by the cost of their clothes instead of the content of their character. A culture my father would have despised. Victoria began to tremble, opening her mouth to speak, but no words came out. As Ellie, I was publicly ridiculed, consistently sabotaged, and assigned to the worst sections to limit my earnings, all because my manager disapproved of my appearance, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a tone of glacial calm. But my experience wasn't unique. I saw it happen to others. I saw fear used as a management tool, and that ends today. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The quiet authority was more damning than any shout. Furthermore, Eleanor said, pulling her phone from her pocket, I discovered something far worse than bullying. I discovered theft. She tapped the screen, and a video played, projected by a small device one of her aides had set up. The grainy footage filled a blank wall. It was shaky, but the image was clear. Victoria Hayes, alone in her office, putting a stack of cash from the tip pool into her purse. The staff gasped again, this time in anger. It all made sense now. The consistently low tip-outs, the excuses, Victoria's expensive new car. Victoria Hayes, Eleanor said, her voice ringing with finality. For theft from your staff, and for creating a toxic and abusive work environment in direct violation of Vance Hospitality Company policy, your employment is terminated. Effective immediately, security will escort you out. 2 uniformed security guards who had been waiting discreetly by the door stepped forward. Victoria was speechless, her face a grotesque mask of shock and terror. She looked pleadingly at the corporate executives, at Julian Albright, but found no help. They stared back at her with cold contempt. As the guards led her away, she finally found her voice, a pathetic wail. But I was just upholding standards. The room was silent as she was escorted out. Eleanor let the moment hang in the air, a clear message to everyone present. Then she turned her attention to Julian Albright. Her expression was no longer one of anger. It was one of cool, professional assessment. Mr. Albright, she began, we were scheduled to sign our partnership agreement this morning, an agreement that would link our brands for the next decade. A Vance Hospitality partnership is more than a business transaction. It is a statement of shared values, values like integrity, respect, and the ability to see worth in people, not just their price tags. Albright got to his feet, his face ashen. He was no longer the arrogant titan. He was a man in a very deep hole. Ms. Vance, I had no idea. Oh, I believe you had no idea who I was, Eleanor said, cutting him off smoothly. But you were there. You and your team. You were there last night when a member of your staff openly mocked a waitress for her clothes. You were there when another of your associates deliberately tripped her. And you sat there in silence. You watched a person being humiliated, and your only concern was getting your next glass of wine. Your judgment, Mr. Albright, was on full display. She took a step forward. My father used to say, you can judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. I was Ellie, the waitress. I could do nothing for you, and I saw your character. She walked to the table where the contract waited. She picked up the thick, beautifully bound document. The Vance Albright partnership as it stands is terminated, she declared, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. She let the contract drop from her hand. It hit the floor with a soft, final thud. Julian Albright looked like he'd been struck. His multi-billion-dollar deal, his grand entrance into the hospitality sector, had just evaporated before his eyes. The soft, definitive thud of the contract hitting the plush carpet echoed in the cavernous silence of the dining room. It was a sound more powerful than a gunshot, a quiet execution of a billion-dollar deal. For a long moment, no one moved. The assembled staff of the Gilded Spoon, who had just witnessed the public firing of their tormentor, now watched, mouths agape, as a titan of the tech world was brought to his knees. Julian Albright stared at the discarded document on the floor, as if it were a physical manifestation of his own failure. His face, usually a mask of sharp, predatory intelligence, had crumbled. The color had drained from it, leaving behind a waxy pallor. His two associates, who the night before had been so full of smug arrogance, now seemed to shrink inside their expensive suits. One of them, the man who had tripped Ellie, was visibly trembling, avoiding Eleanor's gaze at all costs. The bravado of the previous evening was replaced by a raw, pathetic fear. Albright finally lifted his eyes from the floor, not to Eleanor, but to the shocked faces of the restaurant staff. He saw them properly for the first time, not as service units or background figures, but as people. He saw the weariness in their posture, the hope in their eyes, and the quiet dignity they maintained. It was as if a veil had been lifted, forcing him to confront the human cost of his own casual indifference. He finally turned to Eleanor, and when he spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all its boardroom polish. "Ms. Vance." "Eleanor," he began, the name catching in his throat. "There are moments in your life that serve as mirrors, forcing you to see yourself as you truly are. Last night, and this morning, this has been one of those moments for me." He took a deep, shaky breath. "I grew up with nothing. My father was a mechanic. My mother cleaned houses. I wore hand-me-downs that never fit right. I remember the shame. I remember how people looked past me, or worse, down on me." He shook his head, a look of profound self-loathing on his face. "I have spent the last 20 years building an empire so that no one could ever make me feel that way again. But in the process, I became them. I became the man who looks at someone else's worn-out shoes and feels nothing but contempt. I've become everything I hated, and I have fostered that culture in my own team. A culture of arrogance, of entitlement. That is my failure. Not just losing this deal, but losing my own humanity along the way." He looked directly at Eleanor, his eyes pleading not for the deal, but for something more fundamental. "You're right. Your father's legacy is one of character. Mine, I see now, has been one of calculation. There is no excuse for our behavior. It was despicable. I am deeply and truly sorry." Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. She saw past the polished apology to the core of the man. She recognized the sincerity born of utter humiliation. Her goal had never been simply to punish. It was to protect the soul of her company. She had to decide if he was capable of change, or if his remorse was merely the fleeting regret of being caught. "Regret is a powerful motivator, Mr. Albright," she said, her voice calm and measured. "But it is also temporary. The real test is what you do when the shame fades and the world is no longer watching. A partnership with Vance Hospitality is a public statement of shared values. Currently, we do not share them." She let the finality of that statement hang in the air before continuing. "However, I believe more in growth than in destruction. You say you want to change. Prove it." She took a step forward, her voice lowering, meant for him alone. "Don't send me a proposal. Send me proof. Show me a new code of conduct for Albright Tech, one with teeth. Show me an employee wellness program that isn't just for PR. Show me how you're changing the culture you just admitted to creating. Show me how you treat the cleaning staff in your own building. When your actions align with your words, then perhaps we can have another conversation." It was not a yes. It was a challenge, a steep, almost impossible mountain for him to climb. But it was not a no. It was a chance at redemption, and from the look on his face, he understood its immense value. He nodded slowly, a deep, weary gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. It was the most honest thing he'd said all morning. Without another word, he turned and led his silent, humbled team out of the restaurant, leaving the discarded contract on the floor like a monument to his failure. As the doors closed behind them, a collective sigh of relief passed through the room. The oppressive cloud of fear and tension that had lingered under Victoria, and the sharp shock of the confrontation with Albright, finally dissipated. In its place, a fragile, hopeful atmosphere began to grow. Eleanor turned her full attention back to the staff, her people. Her expression softened, the hard CEO mask dissolving to reveal the empathetic leader she had become. "Today," she said, her voice resonating with warmth, "we begin again. We reaffirm the foundation on which my father built this company. My time here has shown me the incredible strength and resilience you all possess. It has also shown me the cracks in our own foundation, cracks I intend to seal, starting now." Her eyes scanned the crowd and found Sam Jackson. He was standing near the back, looking overwhelmed, his eyes still shining with unshed tears. He had watched the entire exchange as if in a dream. "As Ellie," Eleanor began, a small smile playing on her lips, "I was often cold, tired, and disheartened. But there was always one person who offered a kind word, who slipped me a protein bar when he knew I'd missed a meal, who told me not to let the darkness win. She walked slowly toward him, the crowd parting for her. There was one person who, without knowing who I was, stood up for me. But more importantly, he consistently stood up for the memory of my father and the principles this company is supposed to represent. He was the keeper of the Gilded Spoon's soul when everyone else had forgotten it. She stood before him now. Sam looked at her, his face a canvas of disbelief and humility. "Samuel Jackson," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Your integrity, your kindness, and your quiet leadership have not gone unnoticed. I can think of no one better to guide this restaurant into its new era. It is my profound honor to promote you to the position of General Manager of the Gilded Spoon, effective immediately." For a second, Sam just stared, unable to process the words. Then the staff erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of genuine, heartfelt joy. Cooks left their stations to rush out. Bussers dropped their trays, and the entire staff surged forward, engulfing Sam in a wave of congratulations and pats on the back. He was one of them, and his victory was their victory. He looked over the shoulders of his cheering colleagues at Eleanor, tears streaming down his face, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Eleanor let the joyful chaos last for a minute before holding up a hand. As the room quieted, she continued, her tone now firm with purpose. "This change is not just for the Gilded Spoon. It's for all 50,000 employees of the Vance Hospitality Group. I am immediately implementing 3 new core policies. First, a complete overhaul of our management training protocols. From now on, promotions to manager will not be based solely on performance metrics, but on peer reviews and demonstrated empathetic leadership. A manager who cannot foster a respectful, supportive team is not a leader. They are a liability, and it ends today. Second," she said, thinking of the stolen tips, "we are establishing the Vance Integrity Line, a fully anonymous, third-party managed ethics hotline for all employees. If you see something wrong, be it harassment, theft, or any form of abuse, you will have a safe and powerful way to report it without fear of retaliation. Every single report will be investigated at the highest corporate level. We will protect our people. And finally," she said, her voice softening with emotion as she thought of her father, "I want to honor the spirit that started it all. We are creating the Richard Vance Founders Award. Each year, one employee from anywhere in our global family, a janitor, a bellhop, a line cook, a concierge, who is nominated by their peers for best exemplifying our core values of integrity and kindness, will receive a $50,000 bonus and an all-expenses-paid family vacation to any Vance Hospitality property in the world. We are going to celebrate the soul of this company by rewarding it." A wave of stunned, joyous murmurs swept the room. It was more than they could have imagined. It was a promise of real, tangible change. Eleanor looked out at the sea of faces, faces that were no longer just a workforce, but individuals with names, families, and stories she now felt connected to. The ghost in the 80th floor office was gone for good. In her place stood a leader forged not in a boardroom, but in the heat of a kitchen, in the ache of tired feet, and in the quiet dignity of forgotten people. She had gone searching for her father's soul, and in the end, she had found her own. She had secured his legacy not by preserving it in glass, but by breathing new life into it, on the ground where it mattered most. That day, a legend was born within the Vance Hospitality Group. Not the legend of a distant CEO, but of Ellie, the waitress who reminded everyone that true worth is never in the price of your clothes, but in the integrity of your heart. Eleanor's story is a powerful reminder that leaders are not just found in boardrooms. They are forged in moments of quiet observation, in the courage to walk in another person's worn-out shoes, and in the strength to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. What do you think? Did Julian Albright deserve a second chance? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone was completely misjudged? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire and make you think. Click that notification bell so you never miss what happens next.